Cubs came up short, and a couple of days ago we heard from Jed Hoyer, who is the Cubs president, that he's also now going into the last year of a 5-year contract. Is he safe, or are the Cubs okay? Is ownership all right letting him steer the future of this organization? What is it going to take for the Cubs to be successful? I've got 3 fixes that I think would help this roster moving forward. We'll get into that and more right here on the Cubs Baseball Channel. Glad to have all you guys with us. Let's talk a little bit of Cubs today as we roll into the offseason. Go Cubs. Thanks, everybody. It's Mick Gillespie on the Cubs Baseball Channel. Thank you for being here. And as I say every single day, appreciate you guys more than you know. Thank you for making us part of your Cubs day. Now, if you're not part of what we do, like and subscribe, share with your friends. I know I throw that out there every day, but it's part of what you do. I mean, that's how we do this business. Let's get into this past season. And I thought it was interesting, and I still think it's interesting to go back and assess the press conference that Jed Hoyer had talking about last season. And look, the exact same 83-79 record. I don't even know how you do that. I mean, it really is amazing to me that they were able to go and run the same record back that they had the year before, but they did that. So it's interesting to me, to say the least. It's not the worst. I mean, it's not like they came in last place, but at the same time, I don't really feel like they were a true contender. I know we wanted them to be a contender, but they were never really in the picture. I know he said in the press conference that, they were the 6th best team in some of the months and all that. I don't buy into that. You got to be one of the best teams the entire year, and that's, you have the 9th highest rated payroll. That's, you got to win that way. And you've had all those years where they let you lose, build up a roster, and it hasn't really worked. New manager, most money ever paid for one of those guys. It hasn't worked. So what's going on here? And do you think that the Cubs are okay saying, hey, one more year of Hoyer? I don't know. I mean, I was kind of like assessing this because I'm not pulling for Jed Hoyer to get fired. I like Jed Hoyer as a person. I think he's a really good guy. And I know that he wants to win as bad as we do. So let me throw that out there. Now, I know some of you guys are going to get on to me and say, wow, it doesn't matter. These are people. Then you got to remember that. You never want to see anyone, fail at their dream, right? That's the first thing. But the second thing is, what is it that's going on right now that the Cubs aren't doing that's holding them back from success? And if your ownership, are you okay going one more year without giving a contract extension? Or do you feel like, hey, you know what, if we're going to go one more year and I'm not 100% sure, why don't we just move on and bring somebody else in? And I think that's the debate right now. If you're the Cubs, if you have the person that you think is going to lead you to the next World Series, then you need to put them in charge. If you think Jed is right here and you feel like, hey, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to get it done or not, but I'm confident enough and I see a direction and I'm going to go with it, why don't we stick with him? And I think that's the debate that's going on right now. I would not be surprised if the Cubs move on from Jed Hoyer. I just wouldn't. And I'm not pulling for that, but I think it comes down to if the ownership feels like they trust what he's doing. And some of this is that it felt like the same exact press conference from last year. And I didn't feel like they made a whole lot of upgrades to the roster from one year to the next. Maybe they overachieved a little bit in 23, and then in 24, they just were on par. They didn't step up. They, when they needed to, whatever it was. But Cody Bellinger took a step back. He wasn't one of baseball's best players. He was one of the Cubs' best players. But you're talking about, to me, a roster full of players that seem to show up at sometimes and then but aren't consistent. And I feel like that kind of leads me into the biggest fixes that I think that the Cubs are going to have to make the playoffs and really contend for the World Series. And I don't think making the playoffs is contending for a World Series. I think being the Phillies, being the Dodgers, being the Padres, Atlanta, those teams that you feel like, hey, if we catch some breaks and stay healthy, and if you look at 2016, besides Schwarber, the Cubs really stayed healthy. You get the breaks there, but you look at the team at the beginning of the year and you're looking around and you're going, man, I was there that entire spring training, and I'm going, this team is either going to win the World Series or they're going to come really damn close to the World Series. I never felt that way about the Cubs over the last 3 or 4 years. I just didn't look at the roster and say, this is a World Series team. Now, Cody Bellinger, is he going to opt in or is he going to opt out? I'm going to get into that in a second. But what are to me, the 3 biggest fixes that the Cubs can do to make this team better? And I'm going to start with this. I know they have great starting pitching. They really have. But the problem to me with the starting pitching is you got a lot of guys that seem to be on the IL a lot. So it's like Justin Steele, who when he pitches is great, but through his minor league career up until a year ago has always dealt with, he's been injury prone. Then he came back, had a great season, could have won a Cy Young Award, got really close. Then last year, the injuries, and some of them were freak and whatever, but this guy's got to stay healthy. But is he a true ace? Because how much can you rely on him because of his health issues? I think he can, when he's pitching, he's fantastic. Shota Imanaga, is he going to be able to duplicate what he did or take a step further from what he did last year? See, I don't think that's possible. I think that he's either going to be the same or slightly backwards, just because I think that the league will catch up with him. It's not like he's out there throwing Nolan Ryan pitches where he's throwing 100 and something up in the zone. Nobody can hit it, throws a curve. And if you get, out over the plate, he's going to hit you with the pitch. Like this isn't Ferguson Jenkins. This isn't Greg Maddux, but he's a really good pitcher. I think, look, if that guy could be your number 2 or number 3 starter, now you got something. So the Cubs need to go out and get a true ace. Jameson Taillon, to me, isn't a true ace. He had a good year, but he's still a 4 to me. And then a host of guys that you could put in the 5th spot. How about if you moved Javier Assad into the bullpen and then, used him for some spots instead of starting? He's been really consistent, but it's like he runs out of gas. So we'll see if the Cubs are willing to go out and sign a starter. I mean, like a real top-of-the-line ace starter. So I think that's number 3. Number 2 is this one. It's a true star player. And this is another really high budget type of signing here. But are you ready to go out and get a superstar? When I think of World Series championship teams, I think of superstar players. When I'm thinking of like teams that win World Series, I'm looking and I'm going, okay, here's your superstars. And we can go talk about the Cubs. They had more than one when they took it all in 2016. But you look through teams that win World Series, there's superstar talent on those teams. And I feel like the Cubs don't have a superstar. And that's where I'm going to get back into Cody Bellinger. He just wasn't a superstar. He was a good player, but he took a step back. He digressed. He had the injury, the running into the wall, and then that happened and some other stuff. He was good, but he wasn't great. The Cubs paid him to be a superstar. He was okay. He's above average. But he wasn't hitting for power. He wasn't clutch like he was the year before. And now you got to figure out, is this guy going to opt back in? And if he opts back in, what Cody Bellinger are you going to get? Are you going to get the guy that came over in 23 and it was really hungry for a contract and wanted to prove that the Dodger years weren't right? Or do you get the guy you had last year who was a decent piece, lost his center field starting job to a young guy, lost first base to another young guy? Now what do you do with them? And for the Cubs, and I've said this before, and this is one of the biggest problems that I was ownership about Jed Hoyer, is now you got $30 million going to this guy, and you don't have a position for him. And then you got your guy, maybe you could trade Ian Happ and get something else and put Bellinger there, but you got him with a no trade clause. I mean, and I don't know contracts. Maybe that is gone after a certain amount of time, but he's signed. And then you got Seiya Suzuki, who I don't think you would want to get rid of, but you got young players that can play the same spots. You got 3 young outfielders and Pete Crow Armstrong that are all right on the doorstep and need playing time. You don't have any of that for any of these guys. That would be the issue that I would have if it was my team. Maybe you get into a room and you start talking and there's a game plan here, but it just feels like to me, when you look at this thing, you're saying to yourself, okay, why am I not seeing what we're doing here? Because eventually you have to put Owen Casey in the outfield. When you send him back to another year at AAA, are you going to sit him on the bench in the big leagues when he's a better defender and potentially a better hitter than the guy that you're paying for to play right field? Are we okay with Ian Happ? I think Ian Happ's a good player, but we have a lot of good players. We don't have enough great players. And then the monetary aspect of it as well. These guys are all paid. And now what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to sit the guy that's paid, Dansby Swanson, which after last year starts to feel like it was not a good signing. Is him batting 238 or whatever it is and hitting for, kind of suspect power and not doing a whole lot with the bat, been having to bury him in the 8th spot in the lineup. What you wanted when you gave him $177 million to kind of be the cornerstone of your team. That's supposed to be your star, and it's not. It just isn't. So you got to find a star player. Are the Cubs willing to go out and match the Yankees and match the Dodgers and who knows who else for one of these superstar type players, right? Juan Soto. Are you willing to go out there, and is Tom Ricketts willing to dish out the money to pay for a cornerstone star player? Because it takes those guys on a team like this to win a World Series. Then all of a sudden he makes everybody else in the lineup better. They didn't have that this year, and you could definitely feel it. Or maybe one of these guys in the minor leagues comes up and turns into that. But what we found out is that the transition from AAA to the big leagues has been very difficult for the Cubs and for their players. And for whatever reason, they rush them to AAA, they get there, then they get to the big leagues, and they're overmatched for a long time. And then, it took Pete Crow Armstrong a year before he started to look like the Hollywood Pete that we knew he was. All right, and the last of these 3 is bullpen and closer, ace reliever. And this, again, isn't going out and getting another Hector Neris, or Narvis is what I called him at the beginning. Neris, whatever you want to call this guy. His team got bounced from the playoffs in the first round by the Tigers, who went out with young players and built a team that is now very dangerous. And that's what you wonder. If for the Cubs, it's what they did to win a World Series. Why haven't they been able to do that this time around? It just is kind of a different formula, and it feels like an 83-79 formula. Good enough to have a winning record, but not good enough to really compete for a World Series. So what are you going to do? You're going to go out and find a star closer, right? Where? Well, you got to figure that out. You could trade for one, or maybe you could buy one, free agency, or maybe you could develop one, but the Cubs bullpen has got to get better. And that's something that we've talked about the last few years. And 2 years ago, it was, we got 4 guys we can count on, and there were a lot of close games. And then once you got past those 4 guys, the rest of the bullpen was terrible. They didn't get the job done. They're inconsistent, whatever you want to call it. This past year, the bullpen ruined the season. And when the Cubs had a chance to be a contender and they were winning games, the bullpen was awful, embarrassingly bad. Lost the Cubs. Now, give the front office credit. Guys like Tyson Miller, deals like that where they were bringing in players to try to figure out how to, to kind of get back on track, worked. But over the course of this offseason, we're going to find out if Jed Hoyer is really going to be the leader that the Cubs want. And I would not be shocked if they aren't out there looking right now to see if they know who the next guy is going to be. And for Hoyer, if they find that guy, he may suffer the same fate that David Ross suffered. Or maybe he finds out that there's somebody else about to take his job. Or the Cubs may say, hey, you got one more year on your contract. We're good. We'll do the Joe Madden with you. We'll let you finish it out. We're not going to re-sign you, and we're going to see what you can do. And you got one more year. But fans are impatient, and so is money. And when you see the Cubs losing money on Marquee and the team not winning, you're a businessman. You got to look at your entities and go, why aren't we successful? And, for a lot of us, it's pretty clear. But to be successful, you got to have the right people running the ship. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now with this. Anyway, you guys tell me what you think. We'll talk about it in the comments section. Like and subscribe. Thumbs up. Thanks for hanging here on the Cubs Baseball channel. And we'll see you soon, man. I mean, this is one of those times where you go, every day you wake up and you're just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. They fired some coaches, but I don't think that that's anything like what will eventually happen with this. If they don't make any major moves, it really will surprise me. But when that'll happen, I don't know. And I could be totally wrong. I just don't think I am. Go Cubs.